The scent of rain-soaked earth filled my lungs as I knelt by the riverbank. Autumn had set the forest ablaze in amber and gold. Yet the chill that crept through my thin clothes warned that winter was closing in fast. Dew clung to pine needles falling in slow rhythmic drops that sent ripples dancing across the dark surface of the water. This river had always been my refuge, the one place where solitude felt like freedom, not exile. Behind me, the faint echo of laughter and drums drifted through the trees. The pack was celebrating the harvest, their songs rising with the smoke of bonfires. It was the last festival before the snow came. Everyone would be there. Everyone but me. "You don't belong there anyway, Sira," I whispered, tracing lines in the mud with my fingers. Being an omega bottom of the hierarchy had always set me apart, but my curse sealed it. I couldn't shift fully. Not like them. They called me defective, a half-blood, a mistake. My transformation ended halfway, elongated. Canines, sharpened nails, eyes that glowed amber in the dark, but never the full change. Never the freedom of running on 4 legs beneath the moon. The weight of my grandmother's pendant pressed against my chest, a silver crescent moon strung on worn leather. The moon embraces all her children, even those who can't reach her, Nalia Mooncrest had said before she died, pressing it into my palm. "Your strength lies elsewhere, little one." I touched the pendant now, its coolness grounding me as I stared at the water, wondering if she'd known how alone I'd be. A sudden splash shattered the silence. I froze. At first I thought it was a fish, or maybe a heron, but then came a sound that made my blood run cold, a low broken whimper followed by ragged breathing. Something large was thrashing in the shallows. I crept along the bank, my heart pounding hard enough to shake my ribs. 20 yards downstream, half submerged, lay a massive wolf. His silver-gray fur was streaked with blood, his body trembling violently. One hind leg twisted wrong and a deep gash split his side, bleeding into the river until the water ran crimson. Every instinct screamed one. He wasn't one of ours, too big, too wild, his scent foreign. But beneath the scent of blood and power, something else stirred, a pulse of pain, raw and desperate, that pulled at something deep within me. "Hey," I whispered, raising my hand slowly. "I won't hurt you." The wolf's head lifted and I met eyes darker than midnight eyes, unlike any I had ever seen in a shifter. He growled, weak but defiant. He was dying. Without another thought, I stepped into the freezing water. He snapped, teeth flashing, but he was too weak to do more than snarl. "I know," I murmured, trying to steady my shaking voice. "You're strong. You're terrifying. But if you stay here, you'll die, and I can't let that happen." It was madness, but somehow I dragged him to shore. He must have weighed twice what I did, and by the time I got him onto solid ground, my arms were trembling and my soaked clothes clung to my skin. His wounds were worse, up close, torn flesh. Shards of silver embedded deep. Silver. The one thing that could truly kill us. "Who did this to you?" I whispered, brushing blood-matted fur from his face. Even in agony, he radiated something regal, untamed power wrapped in shadow. Night was falling and the cold bit deeper. I couldn't leave him here, but bringing him to the pack was suicide. Draven Coldmark, our alpha, allowed no outsiders within his borders, especially not powerful males who might challenge him. And this wolf, even broken, he emanated dominance. I thought of my cabin a mile upstream, hidden in the thick pines. My father, Sira Valeheart, had built it before he died. My one place of peace, far from Draven's reach. "Just my luck," I muttered, hauling a fallen branch to rig a crude sled. Out of all the wolves in all the damned forests, I find the heaviest one. It took everything I had to move him. Each step burned my muscles, every breath seared my lungs. But I didn't stop. That stubborn spark inside me, the one that refused to die no matter how often I was cast aside, kept me moving. By the time I reached the cabin, my body was trembling from exhaustion, and cold sweat clung to my skin. I dragged him across the threshold, onto the worn rug before the fire. The small space smelled of herbs and pine. Dried bundles hung from the rafters, my grandmother's teachings preserved in glass jars and faded parchment. It wasn't much, a bed, a table, a fireplace, but it was home. And now it held a dying wolf whose fate was somehow tangled with mine. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters, their earthy scent thick in the warm cabin air. My grandmother, Nalia Mooncrest, had taught me every leaf and root before she passed, and healing was about the only reason the pack still came near me. I stoked the fire, then gathered clean cloths, steaming water, a jar of salve made from comfrey and yarrow, and a roll of bandages. The wolf lay unmoving, still unconscious. Carefully, I began cleaning its wounds, removing every shard of embedded silver with tweezers. Each time I pulled one free, the surrounding flesh eased slightly, as if it could finally begin to heal. The broken leg, though, that was going to be another matter entirely. I'd helped the healer treat fractures before, but never on a creature this large. I braced splints and cloth beside me, then positioned myself near its hind leg. "This is going to hurt," I murmured, even though I doubted it could hear me. "I'm sorry." With a quick twist and pull, the bone snapped into alignment with a sickening crunch. The wolf's body jolted and it released a savage howl that rattled the windows. Its black eyes flew open, fierce, pained, furious. Before I could even move, it lunged. In a blink, I was flat on the floor, its massive weight pinning me down. Hot breath panted inches from my face, sharp teeth bared. My chest pounded. I could feel my own pulse screaming in my ears. But then, something strange happened. Its shape shimmered like heat rising off desert stone and began to shift. The fur melted into skin limbs, stretched, spine cracked and twisted. And then he was there. A man. Naked. Bleeding. Midnight eyes. Silver streaks through his thick black hair. The wound on his side still oozed blood, and his leg remained crooked even after I'd set it. But the force radiating off him, power raw and ancient. He leaned close, voice low and hoarse, like it hadn't been used in years. "Who are you?" he growled. "What pack?" My voice caught. I couldn't look away. Most wolves couldn't shift that fast, especially not while injured. But he had. Effortlessly. His hand clamped around my throat. Not enough to stop my breath, but enough to remind me who held control. "Answer me." "Alara," I whispered. He narrowed his eyes. "Northern Pine." I nodded. "You're lying," he snapped. "I know every wolf in Northern Pine. You're not one of them." "I am," I said, my voice steadier now, "just not one they care to admit exists." His expression shifted, slightly. I can't shift fully. I'm the Omega." For a moment, something unreadable flashed behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or pity. His grip eased. "You pulled me out of the river?" he asked. I nodded. "Why?" His question threw me. "Because you were dying." He studied me, like he could see through my skin to the truth beneath it. Whatever he found there must have been enough, because he finally rolled off, wincing when the movement pulled at his wounds. "You shouldn't move," I said, sitting up, trying to gather myself. "I just set that leg, and the silver." "I know what silver does," he snapped. "I need clothes. Food." He looked up at me, unblinking. "Then you're going to tell me exactly where we are and how far it is to the eastern border." I nodded slowly, then went to the chest where I kept some of my father's clothes. They'd be small on him, but better than nothing. I tossed him a pair of pants and a shirt, then turned back to the stove, reheating the pot of stew from earlier. "The eastern border's about 40 miles, I said over my shoulder. "But you're not going to make it 10 in your condition." "You don't know my condition." I turned to look at him now, dressed in Sira Valeheart's clothes tight across his shoulders and chest. "I know silver poisoning when I see it. I know a broken leg when I set one. Even for our kind, that takes time. He gave a dry, bitter laugh. Our kind. He looked me over. We are not the same kind, little Omega. The words hit like they always did, sharp and cold. I lifted my chin. No, we're not. I would have left you in that river. That stopped him. His brows lifted, surprised. I dared say it. And then his legs gave out beneath him. He caught himself on a chair, pride holding him upright. But I saw the sweat on his skin. Sit down before you fall, I said, pointing. The stew's almost done. To my surprise, he obeyed, gritting his teeth as he lowered himself into the chair. His gaze never left me as I moved through the small cabin, gathering bowls, pouring water, keeping busy while my thoughts spun. When I set the steaming bowl in front of him, he stared at it for a long moment, then said, voice rough, "How do I know you didn't poison it?" I looked him square in the eye. "If I wanted you dead," Cain Vaylor said, his voice rough as gravel, "I'd have let the river finish the job." His eyes held mine for a long, piercing beat before he gave a single nod and returned to eating. I sank into the chair across from him, my own bowl growing cold in my hands as I watched him devour the simple stew like it was a king's feast. "You've got questions," he muttered between bites. "Ask." I had 100, but I went with the one that mattered most. "Who are you?" "Someone you should fear." That's not an answer. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "No, it's not. But it's all you'll get for now." The fire popped, throwing flickers of gold across the walls. Outside wind howled through the trees, rattling the shutters. I could hear the distant echoes of my pack's celebration cries under the full moon. Cain tilted his head slightly, listening. "You're Alpha," he said after a moment. "Still Draven." "Coldmark." I blinked in surprise. "You know him, I know of him." A shadow passed over his face. "Tell me, little Omega, how does he treat his pack?" The question made me squirm. Loyalty was bred into us, even those left on the outside like me. But those eyes, black as midnight, unrelenting, demanded honesty. "He's strong," I said slowly. "He keeps us safe." "That's not what I asked." I stared down into my bowl, hands clenched. "He takes what he wants," I said quietly, "and anyone who questions him doesn't get the chance to do it again." Cain nodded like I'd confirmed something he already knew. He pushed his empty bowl aside and tried to stand, only to falter, his leg giving out. Without thinking, I lunged forward to catch him. His weight slammed into me. He was burning up his skin, fever hot. "Silver poisoning," I murmured, helping him to my bed. "You need to rest. Let the herbs work." "I don't have time for this," he growled, but let me ease him down onto the mattress. "Then make time," I snapped, "or plan your own funeral." That startled a laugh out of him, dry and ragged, before he winced in pain. His eyes studied me again, sharper this time. "You're either brave or damn foolish, Sira Valeheart." "I've been told the latter," I muttered, tugging a blanket over him. "Sleep. We'll deal with the rest tomorrow." I turned to step away, but his hand caught my wrist firm, not rough. "Why'd you help me?" I could have lied. Said it was duty, compassion, pack honor. But looking into those endless eyes, only one answer felt true. "Because I know what it's like when no one helps," I said softly. "And I wouldn't wish that on anyone, not even someone I should fear." He let go of my wrist. I moved to lay out a makeshift bed near the fire. As I settled down, his voice drifted to me lower, now edged with something quieter, something human. "My name's Cain," he said. "Just Cain. No pack, no title." It felt like a truth he hadn't given anyone in a long time. "Rest well, Cain," I whispered, touching the moon-shaped pendant at my throat. The fire dimmed. His breathing deepened, and I wondered what fate had led me to that river, and what price I'd pay for pulling him out of it. One thing was clear, nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I woke to sunlight slipping through the slats of my window. and the sharp sensation that someone else was in the room. For a split second, my body tensed until the memories came rushing back. The river, the wolf, the man, Cain. I sat up fast, eyes darting to my bed, empty. Panic surged through me. Had he left? In that state, he wouldn't make it far before the door creaked open. Cain stepped inside, limping but upright. He carried a bundle of firewood, which he dropped beside the hearth with a low grunt. "You're up," he said. "Good. We need to talk." In the daylight, I saw him more clearly. He was tall, too tall for my small cabin, with a presence that seemed to fill every inch of space. The silver streaks in his black hair didn't make him look older, just more commanding. His features were all edges cut from stone, but it was the eyes that held you. So dark they seemed black, until the sunlight hit and revealed that impossible shade of deep blue underneath. My father's old clothes strained against Cain Valer's frame, the shirt pulled tight across his chest, while the pants stopped short above his ankles. Even wounded, even half-dressed, he carried a gravity that filled the cabin until the walls seemed to close in around him. "You shouldn't be walking on that leg," I managed, forcing calm into my voice. "The bone needs time to—" "I heal fast," he cut in, though the tension around his eyes betrayed the lie. "Your herbs helped." I turned to the stove, grateful for the excuse to keep my hands busy. "I'll make tea," I said. "And after that, I should check your wounds again." He eased himself into a chair, the movement slow and deliberate. His gaze tracked every step I took. "Tell me about your pack," he said. "How many?" The question stiffened my spine. Pack numbers weren't something we shared with strangers, especially ones who appeared bleeding and half dead at our borders. I busied myself filling the kettle. "Sira." There was something in his tone, command, layered over warning. I turned to meeting his unflinching stare. "How many in your pack?" "About 60, I admitted reluctantly. "Why warriors? Maybe 20. Again, why does it matter?" He ignored the question, his expression dawed, hardening into thought. "And Draven Coldmark," he continued. "He still has a second." "Raxon Thorn," I said, setting the kettle on the flame. "His cousin." Cain nodded slowly, absorbing every word with unnerving focus. That calculating look made my stomach twist. What business did an injured stranger have with my pack? "Your turn," I said sharply. "Who are you really? And what happened to you?" A flicker of amusement touched his lips. "Direct. I like that." The smile faded as quickly as it came. "I'm from the Eastern Territories, beyond the Great Lake." I froze. The Eastern Territories. The name alone carried weight, half myth, half warning. To most of us, the East was a legend, whispered around the fire, the land of wolves united, under one bloodline ruled not by a council, but by a single king, the Alpha King. I breathed. The pieces fit too easily, the power rolling off him, those midnight eyes, the way he'd shifted while half dead. His face remained unreadable. "You've heard the title," he said. It wasn't a question. "Stories," I replied quietly. "Tales told to pups. They say the Eastern wolves follow one bloodline, older than the mountains. That their king is more beast than man." Cain's mouth twitched, dismissive but not denying it. "Stories have a habit of growing teeth." The kettle began to whistle. I poured the hot water over the dried herbs, mind racing with every impossible implication. If he truly was from the East, if he was tied to that ruling bloodline, what in the God's name was he doing this far west, wounded and hunted? "The silver in your wounds," I said slowly. "Someone came after you on purpose." His jaw flexed. "Yes." "Hunters?" I asked. "Humans still go after our kind sometimes." "No." His tone sharpened, cutting clean through the room. A shadow crossed his expression. "My own kind." I placed the steaming mug in front of him, sitting down across the table. "Werewolves using silver against one of their own politics," he said bitterly. fingers tightening around the mug, though he didn't drink. Power. The usual reasons someone wants a rival dead. A cold shiver crept through me. Whatever storm he'd fled, it wasn't one a lone Omega could weather. Trouble recognizes no borders. Little one Nalia Mooncrest's voice seemed to whisper in the back of my mind. It finds you whether you invite it or not. You need to leave, I said abruptly, as soon as you're strong enough. Whatever war you're fighting, don't bring it here. Kane studied me over the rim of the cup before finally taking a sip. Afraid for your pack, he asked softly. Or for yourself? Both, I admitted. Draven doesn't allow outsiders. If he finds you here, I'm not worried about Draven. Coldmark, you should be, I snapped. Whatever you were in the east, this is his territory. A glint of danger lit his eyes. And what exactly am I in the east, Sira Valeheart? His voice dropped low, dark as thunder. Since you seem to have theories. My throat went dry. I didn't answer right away. I don't know, I said finally. But deep down I feared I did. Someone important enough that others would risk silver to kill you, I said quietly. Kane Vaylor set his mug down with a soft thud. Finish checking the wounds. I need to know how soon I can travel. The shift in his tone told me I'd touched something he wasn't ready to talk about. I said nothing, just gathered my supplies. When I turned back, he'd stripped off my father's shirt. The sight stole my breath. The gash that had torn through his side last night, raw and bleeding, had nearly vanished. The skin was sealed, a faint red line, the only trace left behind. Dozens of scars, old and pale, crossed his torso like a map of forgotten battles. How? I whispered, my fingers hovering just above his skin. I told you, he said simply. I heal fast. Not that fast, I murmured. This isn't normal. Kane's mouth curved faintly, but there was no humor in it. Nothing about me is normal, Sira Valeheart. I forced myself to focus, checking the wound for traces of silver. There were none. Moving to his leg, I examined the splint. The swelling was gone. When I pressed gently, he didn't even flinch. Another day, maybe two, I said finally. Then you can move without tearing anything open. He nodded and slipped the shirt back on, wincing only slightly. 2 days, then I'm gone. A strange mix of relief and disappointment stirred in me. 2 days. That was all. Just long enough for him to vanish as suddenly as he'd appeared. What will you do when you leave? I asked before I could stop myself. Something cold flickered in his expression. Better you don't know, he said, because knowing would make you a target. And you've already taken enough risks by helping me. The words barely settled before a sharp knock rattled the door. My heart leapt into my throat. Sira. You home, Lycia Dawnvale. Kane's eyes locked on mine, all sharp focus and silent warning. I nodded toward the storage room behind me, the only place he could hide. He moved soundlessly, a shadow slipping into the dim back room. I smoothed my hair, forced my heartbeat to steady, and opened the door. Lycia stood there, her breath clouding in the cold air, worry creasing her brow. Sorry to barge in, she said, but I thought you should know. Raxenthorn's organizing search parties. My pulse stumbled. Search parties? For what? Lycia lowered her voice, glancing over her shoulder. Sentries found tracks by the eastern boundary last night. Big ones. And blood. Nathaniel's furious. Cold crept up my spine. Why search here? I'm miles from the border. They're searching everywhere, she said grimly. Raxen thinks whoever it is might be injured and hiding in our territory. And... She hesitated, and what her eyes met mine with apology. Draven ordered them to check all outlying homes places, where someone might shelter an outsider without the pack knowing. The implication hit hard. As an outcast Omega living alone, I might as well have had a target painted on my door. When will they get here? I asked, keeping my tone calm. By nightfall, Lycia said softly. They started from the eastern ridge and are sweeping inward. She squeezed my arm. Just keep your head down, okay? Draven's in one of his moods. I forced a smile. Thanks for the warning. When she left, I shut the door and leaned against it, trying to breathe, past the pounding in my chest. You've got a smart friend. Kane's voice came from behind me. I turned. He'd stepped out of the storeroom, expression carved in steel. Draven Coldmark's moods are the stuff of legend. You need to go, I said, pushing away from the door. Tonight is too soon, but if they find you here, I'm not leaving you to deal with them alone, he cut in. Not when hiding me put you in danger. I'll be fine, I lied. I'm used to Draven's suspicion. Kane's gaze sharpened, a predator's focus softened only by concern. Has he hurt you before? He asked quietly. You're alpha. The question hit harder than I expected, because he didn't ask like a stranger. He asked like someone who already knew the answer. Memories burned their way through my mind. Draven Coldmark's cruel smirk, the way he'd break people down without ever raising a hand. The humiliation he reserved especially for me. Not physically, I said carefully. Not often. Kane Vaylor's eyes darkened, a storm brewing behind them. Often enough. I looked away. It doesn't matter. What matters is getting you out of here before they arrive. It does matter, he said, his tone low, controlled, but laced with an anger that felt more dangerous than any roar. An alpha protects his pack, every single one of them, even the Omega. I gave a bitter laugh. Maybe in the east. Things are different here. He reached up and turned my face toward him. His touch unexpectedly gentle. They shouldn't be. For a long moment we stood there, locked in a silence, heavy with things neither of us dared say. His midnight gaze pinned me in place so deep and intent it made my chest ache. Then just as suddenly he stepped back. We've got until nightfall, he said, all business again. We can prepare. Prepare for what I asked. Dread curling in my gut. You can't fight an entire pack. A dangerous smile curved his lips. I don't need to fight the entire pack. Realization hit me like ice. You can't mean to challenge Draven, I said in disbelief. You can barely stand. I've fought in worse shape, he said, glancing out the window toward the forest. And I won't let you pay the price for helping me. This isn't about me, I snapped, though my heart twisted at his words. It's about survival. Yours. Mine. If you challenge Draven on his land surrounded by his warriors, neither of us will live to see sunrise. Kane turned toward me, unreadable. You underestimate me and him. Draven's cruel. Yes, I said, frustration breaking through my fear. But he's strong. He's kept his throne for 12 years by killing anyone who dared to stand against him. 12 years, Kane repeated quietly, something sharp and calculating in his expression. A long reign for a tyrant. I turned away, retreating to the small kitchen just to have space to breathe. Sunlight filtered through the window dust, drifting lazily in golden beams that felt far too peaceful for the storm brewing inside my cabin. Outside, birds sang oblivious to the war about to ignite beneath their trees. There's another way, I said, finally facing him again. The old tunnels. His head tilted slightly. Tunnels. From the mining days before the humans abandoned the ridge. They run under the northern cliffs, some even beyond pack borders. They're unstable, half-collapsed, but unmapped. Draven search parties won't think to check them. Kane considered this, fingers tapping against the windowsill. You know them well enough. My father showed me when I was little. The memory caught in my throat. He said I might need a way out one day. Something softened in Kane's face. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, I murmured. Then quieter. Draven killed him 5 years ago. Said he questioned leadership. The words hung between us like smoke. I hadn't meant to speak them. I never spoke of that night. But Kane had a way of pulling truth from me before I realized it was leaving my lips. I see, he said simply. And somehow those 2 words carried more understanding than 1,000 apologies. All the more reason I should stay and face him. No. My voice came out sharper than intended. All the more reason you should leave. My father died believing I might have a life beyond Draven's cruelty. I won't dishonor that by throwing myself into the same fire. Cain crossed the room in 2 strides, moving with the predatory grace that reminded me what he truly was. Even wounded, he radiated raw power. He stopped too close, and my pulse stumbled. "And what kind of life is this, Sira Valeheart?" he asked softly. "Hiding in a cabin at the edge of your own land, praying your alpha never remembers you exist." His words struck deep, tearing open the quiet truth I'd lived with for years. My peace was nothing but Draven's temporary disinterest. "It's the only safety I've known," I whispered. Cain reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering just a heartbeat longer than they should have. "There are other kinds," he said gently. And for that heartbeat I let myself imagine it, a world where I didn't have to shrink or bow, where pack meant family, not fear. Where someone like Cain Valor looked at me the way he was looking at me now. Then reality slammed back into place, cold and merciless as ever. I took a step back, shattering the fragile silence that hung between us. "We should gather supplies," I said briskly, forcing my voice steady. "If we leave by midday, we can reach the tunnel entrance before Draven's search teams make it this far." Something flickered in Cain Valor's eyes. Disappointment, or maybe the weight of acceptance. He gave a small nod, his expression hardening back to that disciplined calm that always reminded me he was born to lead. "Tell me what we'll need," he said. The next few hours blurred into quiet, focused movement. I filled a worn satchel with what little I had: dried meat and fruit, a waterskin, bandages, matches, and a pouch of my most potent healing herbs. Cain tested his leg, finding it stronger, but not whole. The limp was still there, yet his movements had purpose, precision. Even wounded, he carried himself like a wolf who'd never known fear. By midday, I stood in the center of my small cabin, my sanctuary for the last 5 years. The air was thick with the scent of sage and pine resin. Bundles of herbs hung from the rafters. My father's old chair sat by the hearth. A quilt my grandmother Nalia Mooncrest had sewn still draped across the bed. Sketches of wildflowers pinned to the walls fluttered in the faint breeze. Every piece of it was mine, and I might never see it again. Cain's voice came softly from behind me. "We can find another way, Sira Valeheart, if you're not ready to leave this behind." I turned the pendant at my neck, my grandmother's talisman, smooth and warm from years of wear. "I've been ready for years," I said quietly, "just waiting for a reason." My eyes met his. "I just never thought that reason would crawl half dead out of my river." That earned me a rare smile, brief but real. It changed his face entirely, softening the warrior into something almost boyish. "Life doesn't often ask our permission," he said. "No," I murmured. "It doesn't." We left the cabin under the hard light of midday, keeping to the shadowed trails where the forest grew thick enough to hide us. Cain moved with surprising agility, despite the limp, the predator in him instinctively adjusting to every uneven step. I had to lengthen my stride to keep pace. The ridge rose before us, marking the edge of cold-marked territory. After nearly an hour of steady silence, I broke it. "You never told me how you ended up in that river, or why you were in our lands to begin with." Cain didn't answer right away. His voice, when it came, was measured low. "There's unrest in the eastern territories, challenges to the throne. I was sent to confirm rumors that some dissidents had fled west, seeking alliances." My stomach tightened. Alliances for what? He looked ahead, eyes narrowing on some memory only he could see. War. The word fell like a blade between us. Werewolf wars were supposed to be ancient history legends whispered by elders about the days when packs tore each other apart and nearly exposed our kind to humans. The thought chilled me. "That still doesn't explain the silver," I said softly, "or why you were alone." His jaw tightened. I wasn't alone. My party was ambushed 3 nights ago near the Great Lake. Silver-tipped arrows, precision strikes, professional hunters. He hesitated, then added grimly, but wolves guided them. I froze. Your own kind. There are wolves who'd bargain with devils for a taste of power, he said bitterly. Human silver. It makes no difference to them. I escaped with an arrow in my leg. Made it this far before the current dragged me under. And your men, I asked gently. Silence. His answer was in the hollow of his voice. I'm sorry, I whispered. He gave a small nod, then stopped so abruptly that I nearly collided with him. His body went still, every sense tuned. I followed his lead, straining to listen. For a moment there was nothing, just wind in the branches, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of distant birds. Then it came, the unmistakable sound of wolves moving through the woods in formation, dozens of paws pounding earth in unison. The search parties, I breathed. They're closer than your friend thought, Kane said, voice low and sharp. How far to the tunnels? Another hour, maybe less. I glanced to the east where the sound was growing louder. They're sweeping west. If we keep north, we might slip past them. He nodded once and we moved. Faster now. The forest thickened as we neared the ridge, tangles of roots and stone, turning the ground treacherous. Kane's limp grew more pronounced, but he didn't slow. When he stumbled on a loose rock, I reached out instinctively, catching his arm. The heat of him jolted through me, alive, solid, unyielding. For an instant, neither of us moved. His eyes met mine, those midnight depths locking me in place. The air between us tightened, thick and humming, as if the world itself had stopped to watch. Then the stillness shattered, a long, haunting howl cutting through the forest air, closer than before. Kane's gaze flicked toward the sound. They found our trail, he said. And the spell broke as the hunt began. They've picked up our trail, Kane Valor, said, his voice low and grim as he tore his arm free of my grasp. We need to move now. The fear in my chest burned hotter than fire. My lungs ached as we half ran, half climbed up the steep slope. Roots snagged my boots, stones cut into my palms when I slipped. The ridge loomed above us like the jagged spine of some ancient beast, its sparse trees and brush offering little shelter. The tunnels just beneath the crest, I panted. Behind a fallen pine, been there since my father's time. A long, haunting howl shattered the air, answered by several others from different directions. The pack was coordinating, closing the circle. They're surrounding us. I gasped, my breath tearing through my throat. We won't make it. Kane stopped abruptly, turning to face me, his expression sharp with decision. Go, get to the tunnels. I'll draw them off. What? I seized his arm, my pulse hammering. You can't outrun them. Not with that leg. His voice was steady, cold, resolute. They won't catch me. But you need time and I'll give it to you. I'm not leaving you. I shot back my words, fierce enough to surprise even me. We go together or not at all. Something flickered in his gaze, surprise first, then something dangerously close to respect. Stubbornness won't save you, little Omega. Neither will pointless sacrifice. I countered, my tone sharper than I intended. Then I pointed to a narrow path cutting across the ridge. That trail, it's a deer run. It passes through a stand of blackthorn. Their scent will mask ours long enough to reach the upper ridge. Kane hesitated, torn between instinct and reason. Then another howl echoed closer, too close. That decided him. Lead the way. We dove into the undergrowth, branches clawing at our skin as we forced through the tangle of blackthorn. The path was barely more than a game trail, winding and treacherous. The sharp thorns tore my sleeves and left thin scratches along my arms. Kane followed close behind, silent despite his limp, moving with the kind of predatory grace that came from centuries of survival carved into his bloodline. By the time we broke free of the thorns, my skin burned with shallow cuts and my heart hammered in my chest. Kane's shirt was torn, streaked with blood, but his expression stayed calm, focused, unyielding. There, I whispered, pointing toward the massive pines sprawled across the ridge like a fallen sentinel. Behind that. We sprinted the final stretch. The forest echoed with movement behind us, paws striking dirt, low growls carrying through the trees. They'd lost our scent for now. But it wouldn't last long. I dropped behind the great trunk, sweeping aside years of brush and moss, until the dark mouth of the tunnel yawned open before us. Cold, stale air rolled out thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten stone. It's narrow, I warned, and pitch black in some places. Kane's eyes shifted in the dim light, midnight blue, edged with a feral gleam. His wolf sight had already taken over. After you. Sira Valeheart. I gave one last glance at the forest, the only home I'd ever known, and stepped into the tunnel's waiting darkness. Kane followed his presence, a steady shadow at my back. The world closed in around us. The forest light disappeared behind a curtain of black, replaced by the cold breath of the mountain. The air grew damp and heavy. Every sound amplified the echo of our footsteps, the slow drip of water from unseen cracks, the faint beat of my own pulse in my ears. "Stay close," I whispered. My voice sounded strange, swallowed by the stone. There are sudden drops and false tunnels. It's easy to get lost. I can see, Kane murmured, his voice little more than a growl in the dark. In the faint glow that bled from the entrance, I caught the gleam of his wolf eyes, otherworldly predatory. My own partial shift gave me better sight than a human, but nowhere near his. I reached into my pack fingers, trembling slightly, and lit the small lantern I'd brought. The flame flared, casting flickering gold light across the rough, hand-carved walls. Shadows leapt and danced alive with memory. "This way," I said, raising the lantern and moving deeper into the ridge. The air grew colder, the ceiling lower. Our footsteps echoed, mingling with the slow trickle of groundwater that whispered along the stone. "These tunnels were carved by human miners," I said quietly. "Decades ago. They were hunting for silver." Kane gave a low, ironic huff. "Fitting." "Yeah," I muttered, "considering what it does to us." We walked for what felt like forever, the tunnel twisting and turning, until finally it split in two. I stopped, holding the lantern high. "The left path leads deeper into the mountain," I said. "The right comes out past the valley beyond pack borders." "Then we take the right," Kane said, stepping forward without hesitation. I caught his arm, the lantern light glinting off his sleeve. "Wait, it's not that simple. The right passage." I said the words, trembling slightly in the cold air. There was a collapse the last time I came through years ago. We might not be able to get past it. The left tunnel is longer, tangled with dead ends, but it eventually comes out north, beyond Draven's borders. Kane Valor studied the darkness ahead, his face unreadable in the shifting lantern light. "How far to the collapse?" "Half an hour, maybe less." He nodded once. "Then we take the right until it ends. If it's blocked, we backtrack." I gave a quick nod and we pressed forward. The tunnel narrowed to the point where we had to walk single file, our shoulders scraping rough stone. Kane insisted on taking the lead despite his limp, his larger frame shielding me from whatever waited in the dark. That small, wordless act struck something deep within me, something fragile and long neglected. The air grew colder. The scent of wet earth sharp in my nose. Water clung to the tunnel walls, catching the lantern's glow like veins of glass. The ground turned uneven, littered with broken rock from long-forgotten collapses. Then Kane froze. "Sira," he murmured. "Listen." I stilled, heart pounding in my ears. At first there was nothing, just the soft drip of water, our shallow breaths. Then I heard it, the faint rhythm of footsteps echoing from behind. Not the scurry of rodents. Heavier, deliberate, wolves. "They found the entrance," I whispered. Dread turned my blood to ice. "Put it out," Kane said quietly. "The light." "But I can't see without I can." He cut in sharply, then softer. "Trust me." That word. Trust. Something I'd learned never to give freely, not in Draven's pack, not in a world where weakness was hunted down and paraded as a lesson. But when I looked at Cain, his expression calm, unwavering. Even in the dark, I believed him. I exhaled shakily and snuffed the lantern. Darkness swallowed everything. For a moment, panic rose like a wave. Then his hand found mine, warm, firm grounding. "Stay close," he whispered, his breath brushing my ear, sending a shiver straight down my spine. "I won't let you fall." He guided my hand to the leather strap at his belt. "Hold on," he said. "Follow my steps." So I did. My world narrowed to the heat of his body ahead of me and the faint sound of our feet over stone. Each shift of his muscles told me when to duck, when to climb, when to pause. Behind us, the echo of pursuit grew louder, at least 2, maybe 3 wolves. "They'll catch our scent," I breathed. "I'm counting on it," Cain replied, his voice low, dangerous. "We just need to reach the collapse first." We pressed deeper, into the black, moving faster despite the uneven ground. My legs ached. My palms scraped raw against the tunnel walls, but I didn't dare slow. The air grew colder, heavier, until even sound seemed to muffle under its weight. Then Cain stopped so suddenly that I collided into his back. "We're here," he said, and I didn't need light to hear the grimness in his tone. My fingers fumbled with the flint, relighting the lantern. The faint flame revealed exactly what I feared, a wall of collapsed stone, jagged and solid, stretching from floor to ceiling. No way through. "No." My voice cracked. "We're trapped." Cain ran his hands over the rocks, testing for weakness. Dust fell in soft puffs, but nothing gave. "Any side tunnels? Openings?" I shook my head, then realized he couldn't see the gesture. "No. We'd have to go back to the fork. There's no time." He turned toward me, his face carved with focus, and something fiercer beneath it. And then the howl. It echoed down the passage, closer than ever, vibrating through the stone. I could almost feel the ground tremble beneath the sound of it. My heart leapt to my throat. Cain's hands closed around my shoulders, firm and steady. His voice was low, deliberate. "Sira Valeheart, do you trust me?" I looked up into those midnight eyes, and despite everything, the fear, the walls closing, and the wolves drawing nearer, I found the truth on my tongue before I could stop it. "Yes," I whispered. His lips curved into something sharp, almost feral. "Good. Then do exactly what I tell you." He set the lantern down gently on a rock. "When they come, and they will, you stay behind me, no matter what happens. No matter what you see or hear, you don't move. Understand?" I nodded, trembling. "What are you going to do?" That predatory smile deepened, cold and sure. What I should have done from the start. Cain faced them. "You can't fight here," I protested, motioning to the narrow, uneven space. "Not with your leg." But his gaze silenced me, dark, steady, and burning with something ancient, something dangerous. And for the first time I wondered who was really trapped down here with whom. My legs strong enough for this, Cain Valor cut in his tone, edged with steel. "And the tunnel favors us. It's too narrow for them to attack in numbers. They'll have to come one at a time." Before I could argue, the sound of claws scraping stone echoed through the darkness. Close, too close. Cain turned, placing me against the rough wall, his broad frame shifting to stand between me and the oncoming threat. His whole body coiled, ready to strike. "Remember," he said without looking back, "stay behind me, no matter what." The words had barely left his lips when 2 pairs of glowing eyes emerged from the shadows ahead, catching the faint flicker of our lantern. The wolves moved slowly, their growls vibrating through the narrow space. They sensed the trap of a dead end, but their hunger or their orders pushed them forward anyway. When they stepped into the light, I froze. I knew those eyes. Raxon. Thorndraven's second shifted first, his wolf melting into the lean, scarred man beneath. He had the same cold grin as his cousin and twice the cruelty. Well, he drawled, straightening to his full height. the little Omega who never learned her place. His gaze flicked past me to Cain. And look what she dragged home, a rather large stray. Behind him, Talon Creed stayed in wolf form, massive and bristling, their lips curled back to bare teeth. The two of them filled the tunnel, blocking any hope of escape. "Step aside," Cain said, his voice quiet, steady, layered with command. "We mean no harm to your pack." Raxon's laugh echoed harshly off the stone. "No harm. You trespass into Coldmark land, hide from our alpha and call it harmless." His sneer cut toward me. "And you? Omega harboring an outsider. Draven will be very interested." A chill swept through me. Draven's interest never ended well for anyone. The girl had no choice, Cain said evenly, drawing Raxon's attention back to him. "I compelled her help." "Did you now?" Raxon tilted his head, smirking, curious how willing she looks for someone compelled. Talon growled low, the rumble reverberating through the ground. Cain shifted subtly, his entire presence changing, still dangerous, every muscle drawn tight as a bowstring. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice deepening, roughening with the edge of his wolf. "Stand down." Raxon's grin widened. "I don't think so. Draven will want to meet the fool who thought he could cross our borders and decide what to do with his accomplice." It happened in a blink. 1 second, Cain stood still. The next, he moved. The sound that followed was bone and thunder, Cain slamming into Raxon with such force that both men hit the wall. Talon lunged to intercept, but Cain twisted, driving his elbow into the wolf's ribs before all three collapsed into a tangle of fur, muscle, and blood. The tunnel exploded into chaos, snarls, claws, and the wet sound of impact echoing off the stone. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering as I watched Cain fight like something out of legend. His body flowed between forms, neither fully man nor wolf. Each movement precise, deadly. Raxon shifted mid-struggle, fur bursting from skin as his bones snapped into place. Now 2 wolves circled Cain, their growls vibrating through the air. They lunged in unison, perfectly trained, perfectly lethal. But Cain moved like a storm unleashed. Every strike was clean, calculated, brutal. When Talon darted for his injured leg, Cain anticipated the move, spinning with terrifying speed. His arm hooked under the wolf's jaw, momentum carrying him through the motion as he hurled Talon into the wall. Stone cracked under the impact. Talon crumpled and didn't rise. Raxon hesitated for half a second, half a heartbeat too long. Cain was on him in a blur of motion, one hand locking around his throat. The sound that followed was low, guttural, primal. "Yield," Cain growled the word, more beast than man. Raxon raked his claws down Cain's chest, tearing flesh. Blood spilled across his skin, but Cain didn't flinch. His grip only tightened. "Yield." Raxon's eyes glowed molten gold, defiant, even as his breath came in ragged bursts. He snapped his jaws at Cain's face, missing by inches. And then I saw it, the shift in Cain's expression. Something ancient and merciless flickered there, something that made the air go still. "Stop!" I shouted, unable to bear the sight. "Cain, please, don't kill him." For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then Cain's jaw clenched and his fingers slowly eased their hold. Raxon collapsed to the ground, gasping, his wolf form trembling as it began to fade. Cain stood over him, chest heaving, blood streaking down his arms. His voice was low, steady, dangerous. "Tell your alpha," he said, every word echoing like prophecy. "His reign of unchecked cruelty ends tonight. The old ways are rising again." Raxon looked up at him, eyes still burning with hate and something else, something closer to fear. Fear. It wasn't fear of Cain Valor. I realized that with a jolt, it was fear of what Raxon Thorn would have to face when he crawled back to Draven Coldmark. Fear of the Alpha's wrath of returning with nothing but failure and shame. "Go," Cain ordered, his tone rough but steady. a sound that filled the tunnel like a command from something far older than any pack. He stepped aside, giving Raxon just enough room to stagger to his feet. "Take your friend and get out. Consider your lives payment for what you would have done to her." His chin lifted slightly in my direction. The meaning was clear. For one tense heartbeat, Raxon's eyes flicked between Kane's blood-slick hands and my face. His wolf form trembled with fury and something colder, heavier. Then Kane shifted barely perceptibly, his body radiating such quiet, lethal power that the decision was made for him. He nudged Talon Creed, who was beginning to stir, dazed and groaning. The two of them retreated, limping and silent, swallowed by the darkness that had birthed them. When the echo of their departure finally faded, Kane turned toward me. His chest heaved with effort, blood dripping from fresh gashes down his arms, pooling in red crescents on the stone floor. The wild light in his eyes softened into concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice still rough with the remnants of his growl. I blinked at him, torn between awe and disbelief. "Am I? You're the one bleeding like you fought a damn bear." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Looks worse than it feels." He glanced toward the rockfall behind us. "But we still need to move. There's no getting out that way." "The left passage," I said, quickly retrieving the lantern with trembling fingers. "We can backtrack to the fork." Kane nodded but swayed slightly as he turned. One hand caught the wall to steady himself, and that single motion revealed the truth: he was far worse off than he let on. The claw marks along his chest were deep, his leg trembling from strain. Without hesitation, I slipped under his arm, bracing him against my shoulder. He stiffened, as if unaccustomed to being helped. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, he let his weight settle across me. "Thank you," he murmured. But it wasn't a simple thanks. The words carried something heavier, something that lingered in the air between us. "We help each other," I said quietly. "That's what a real pack does." His arm tightened around my shoulders for just a moment, an unspoken acknowledgement. Together we made our way back through the tunnel, leaving behind blood-broken stone and something else I couldn't quite name, something raw and unshakable that had been forged between us in the dark. The left passage proved worse than the first, narrower, slick, with moisture-jagged rocks, forcing us to slow to a crawl in places. Kane leaned heavier on me with every step, his breathing growing uneven whenever a misstep jarred his wounds. But he never complained, never even suggested resting. "You should let me clean those cuts," I said, as we paused at a split in the tunnel. "They're still bleeding." "Later," he said, forcing himself upright with visible effort. "Once we're clear of Colmark territory." I studied his face in the dim light, the hard lines of pain he was too proud to admit, the determined set of his jaw. "You won't be much use to anyone if you bleed out before we get there." A rough, tired chuckle escaped him. "Your concern is touching little Omega." "Stop calling me that." The words came out sharper than I intended. His brows lifted faintly. "Calling you what? Little Omega?" I met his gaze squarely. "You fought for me back there. You're bleeding because of me. I think we're past pack titles, don't you?" For a moment, something unguarded flickered in his eyes. Surprise, then warmth, then something deeper, unreadable. "Sira," he said softly, tasting my name like it was something sacred. Which way I gestured left, and we pressed on. Time blurred into darkness and echo. My body screamed from fatigue, but I kept moving, step by step, breath by breath. The thought of stopping felt like surrender, and I refused to let that happen. Then at last the air began to shift. It grew cooler, cleaner, carrying the scent of pine and open sky instead of wet stone. "We're close," I whispered, hope fluttering in my chest for the first time in hours. The northern exit should be near. Kane nodded, scanning the path ahead. His midnight eyes glinted faintly in the lantern glow. "And what's waiting for us out there, wilderness?" I said. "The northern territories are unclaimed, too wild for most packs to bother with. We'll be outside Draven's reach at least for a while." "For now," he murmured, Something dark passed across his expression like the shadow of a storm cloud. Draven won't forgive this. Or forget it. The truth of that settled heavy between us. There was no going back, not to my cabin, not to the small quiet life I'd built at the edge of his domain. By choosing to help Cain, I had burned every bridge behind me. I knew the cost, I said softly, and I'd do it again. Cain looked at me for a long moment, long enough that the air seemed to still between us. Whatever he saw in my face eased something inside him. He gave a single nod before turning back to the tunnel ahead. We walked on toward the faint promise of light, carrying the scent of bloodstone and freedom with us. The tunnel began to climb steadily, the air thinning as the ceiling dipped lower until we had to bow our heads to keep moving. My shoulders scraped rough stone. Then suddenly I saw it. A faint silvery glow ahead, soft and unreal after so long in the dark. The exit. Hope ignited in my chest, wild and bright. We pushed faster, stumbling toward that light like moths chasing a flame. The passage ended in a jagged opening, half choked with roots and brush, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. We emerged into the dying light of late afternoon. The sun hit my face like a burning brand after hours underground. The air was sharp with winter's first breath, cold clean, carrying the scent of pine and far-off snow, sweeping down from the peaks. We stood on the side of a mountain, the world spilling wide below us. A deep valley stretched out in endless green and silver, broken only by a winding river that shimmered like a blade. In the far distance, a range of dark blue mountains marked the edge of the eastern lands, Cain Veiler's domain. We made it. I breathed awe and disbelief catching in my throat. I wasn't just outside Draven Coldmark's borders. I was standing in a land untouched by any pack law. Cain straightened beside me, no longer leaning on my shoulder. Even battered and bloodied, he looked like something carved out of the wilderness itself. Unyielding, powerful, alive. His eyes scanned the ridge, measuring distance and danger, in one slow sweep. "Night's coming fast," he said at last, his voice rough but steady. "We'll need shelter, and your alpha looks like hell." He gestured toward a stand of pines farther down the slope. I followed him, careful of the loose shale underfoot. Beneath the trees, the air was still and shadowed. I helped Cain ease down against the trunk of an old pine and began digging through my pack. "Take off your shirt," I said, trying to sound clinical, though my pulse betrayed me. He gave a low, humorless chuckle, but obeyed, peeling the torn fabric away from his skin. The sight made me suck in a breath. 4 long gashes slashed across his chest, deeper claw marks. Raked down his arms, racks and thorns handiwork. Yet already, I could see the edges knitting faintly together, as if the wounds refused to stay open. "You're healing," I murmured, dipping a cloth into water from the canteen. "It's faster than anything I've seen." He tilted his head, eyes half-lidded, voice low. "Perk of my bloodline. Comes with its curses, too." I cleaned the blood away, applied a thick layer of yarrow and comfrey paste, and wrapped his chest with bandages from my pack. He didn't flinch once, though his eyes never left me. That gaze, dark, steady, unreadable, made my hands tremble more than any wound could. "There," I said, finally tying the last strip of cloth. "That should hold." "Thank you," he said softly. Simple words, but they carried the weight of something deeper. I busied myself gathering dry twigs and bark. The fire caught with a faint crackle, its glow painting flickering gold over Cain's features. We sat opposite each other, the flames dancing between us. Silence stretching long and full. Finally, I asked the question that had followed us since the tunnels. "What happens now?" Cain's eyes lifted from the fire, their reflection molten and unreadable. "Now," he said slowly, "you have to choose." "Choose," he nodded. "I'm heading east to finish what I started. You can come with me." He hesitated, the smallest flicker of vulnerability passing through his gaze. "Or I can make sure you find safety somewhere beyond Draven's reach." His words hit harder than I expected. After everything, after the blood and the fear and the closeness, I hadn't imagined parting ways. And yet here he was, offering freedom instead of chains. Why would I go east, I asked quietly, needing to know what truth lay behind his offer. Cain stared into the fire for a long moment before speaking again. When he did, his voice had changed low, deliberate, almost solemn. Because the eastern lands aren't just my home, Sira, he said. They're my responsibility. I'm not just from the east. He met my eyes fully. I rule it. I'm the Alpha King. The words struck like thunder. I'd suspected something, his strength, the way even enemies hesitated to meet his gaze, but hearing it aloud sent a chill racing down my spine. The wolf I had pulled half dead from the river, the stranger I had argued with, protected and bled beside, was the sovereign of every pack east of the mountains. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, unable to hide the tremor in my voice. At first caution, he admitted. I was injured alone in a land that wasn't mine. And then, his eyes softened, locking onto mine. Then I found something rare. Someone, he corrected quietly. Someone who looked at me and didn't see a king, didn't see an alpha, just a wolf who needed help. His words lingered between us, heavy as the twilight settling through the pines. And for the first time I understood the weight he carried, and how easily, without realizing it, I had become a part of it. I turned his words over in my mind, every syllable echoing with dangerous possibility. And what would I be in the east, I asked finally. Another subject kneeling before the Alpha King. Something flared in Cain Vaylor's eyes, then a fierce light that had nothing to do with the fire flickering between us. No, he said, his voice low and sure. Never that. Then what? I pressed, needing to hear him say it, to understand the truth buried beneath that calm, commanding tone. Cain moved before I could breathe. He circled the fire, the shadows bending with him, and knelt at my feet. The closeness stole my breath. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the scent that was uniquely him, pine smoke, and the raw edge of wild freedom. Come to the east as my equal, he said softly, the words vibrating through the night. As my partner, my queen. The world went still. The flames between us seemed to hold their breath. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I stared at him, at the man who'd nearly died in my arms, who'd fought through blood and darkness for both our lives, and I couldn't reconcile that wounded wolf with the ruler before me now. We barely know each other, I said at last, though the words rang weak even to my own ears. In 2 days, Cain had seen more of me, my courage, my fear, my scars, than my pack had in years. I know enough, he countered quietly. I know your bravery outshines most warriors I've met. I know your compassion doesn't end with your own kind. And I know, his voice deepened, roughened, that when you pulled me from that river, something inside me knew you. His hand lifted, hesitant, stopping just shy of my cheek, as if asking permission. It was as if the moon herself guided me to you, Sira Valeheart. The words rippled through me like a current. Around my neck, my grandmother, Nalia's pendant, felt suddenly heavy. Her voice whispering through memory. The moon embraces all her children. Maybe this was what she meant, that my place had never been among those who rejected me for what I couldn't become, but with someone who saw what I already was. I reached up, closing the space between us, pressing his hand to my cheek. His skin was warm, solid, real, his strength tempered by a gentleness that undid me completely. The east is far, I murmured, my voice trembling as much from emotion as exhaustion. He smiled faintly. Then it's a long road we'll walk together. His thumb brushed the curve of my cheek. And the journey will be lighter for it. The night wrapped around us, cool and endless. The fire crackled softly, its glow haloing the edges of his face. And there, beneath the watchful eye of the moon, I made my choice. Leaning forward, I kissed him. It was soft at first, uncertain, then deepened into something timeless, ancient as the pull of the tides, fierce as the blood in our veins. When we parted, Cain's eyes caught mine, gleaming with that same wild fire. So he said, voice rough with emotion. Is that a yes, Sira? Of the northern pines I smiled, then feeling the weight of my past fall away like an old skin. It's a yes, Cain of the East. I'll go with you, not as a subject, not as an omega, but as myself, as your equal. His answering smile was pure light, softening the harsh lines of the warrior into something free, unguarded. We stayed there, beneath the whispering pines as night fully claimed the sky, planning our path eastward to whatever destiny awaited us beyond the mountains. And as the moon climbed higher, I finally understood my grandmother's words. My half-shifted form was never a curse. It had been my gift, my strength. It had kept me between worlds, so I could see what others could not. The moon hadn't forsaken me. She had led me to a river, to a fallen king, and to the moment we both rose together beneath her silver light.